Hello, everyone. In this video, I'm going to be talking about cultural considerations in group counseling work. This is obviously not an exhaustive conversation, an exhaustive video, but just a few considerations to get you thinking about cultural dynamics in group counseling. So this video is pulling from a textbook by Erford. That's where I'm gathering some of the quotes and some of the thoughts. So yeah, if there are more questions about that, feel free to comment. Okay, so just to introduce, so from the Erford chapter on group counseling uh, with cultural dynamics, uh, the author states every group will be influenced by the cultural background of its members. In essence, a group becomes a social microcosm whereby the group members' values, beliefs, prejudices, cultural biases, and past experiences are played out in the group setting. Uh, Continuing on, leaders must be skilled in working with members who are quiet, suspicious, pessimistic, cynical, and even angry. That's right from the introduction from that, because those reactions could be cultural reactions to the group experience. Maybe not, but they could be. So basically, it's just an invitation to have an eye for culture in all group settings because all groups are cultural groups. Every member has a cultural background and traditions that they're bringing to the present situation. And kind of working through some of those dynamics is often really important for group counseling. So I guess the ultimate principle behind this video is and like the idea of addressing culture in group counseling is that we have to be willing and ready to address conflict around issues of culture as well as to address connection around issues of culture because it can be a source of both and anywhere in between, that there can be cultural conflicts as well as important and beautiful cultural connections. Uh, so in the Erford chapter, it talked about ways of preparing for groups and for preparing for the cultural dynamics of groups. And so I just briefly wanted to go over those or a few thoughts on those. So the first is that we always need to be self-reflecting as group leaders on issues of culture. And particularly, I feel like the most important piece of that is who are we as cultural beings? What are the cultural traditions and the cultural foundations of us as leaders, as group leaders? Because that's usually if we haven't done that inner work, then we won't be able to really notice or navigate the cultural waters as they surface in group settings. So that's step one is our willingness to self-explore. And then another important step is that are we willing to explore and understand how non-majority cultural groups, and quoted from the Erfurt text says, may view the group process and the group leader. So non-majority cultural groups are likely going to have some reactions towards the majority culture. Uh, so some questions to be thinking of and reflecting on is like, so how do group members identify themselves? Uh, can members of the group teach about themselves without needing to become the cultural spokesperson for their subcultural group? I think that's really important that we're not just like, oh, all of a sudden you are the key person to speak for everyone in your community. And we also need to be aware of and be able to navigate conversations around culturally infused terms. So, for example, issues of marginalization, oppression, microaggressions. We need to be able to think about and understand those terms so we can kind of navigate those conversations should they emerge. So, for example, in the Erfurt textbook chapter, on page 3, it talks about oppression refers to the unjust use of authority, force, or social norms and laws to exert control over individuals, a people, or a group. So that's one definition of oppression. Marginalization, the definition here is still on page 3. Marginalization is the social process of becoming excluded from or existing outside mainstream society or a given group. Given this dominant group reference, marginalization oddly places individuals of the target group on the outside or fringes of the dominant culture, while simultaneously placing them inside the dominant culture. So just being thoughtful of how experiences, how participants might experience the idea of oppression in their life and marginalization or microaggressions can be really important to navigate. In some of my counseling, I've really noticed that I've had to be up to date on those terms and how they might experience those terms in order to not like have this dynamic play out where the client needs to just teach me basic information about their cultural experiences, that like I need to be ready for those and be thoughtful of those terms. Not that I need to be perfect, because I'm not, or that I have to be all knowing about cultural experiences, but I need to be trying to train myself. And that's actually one of the next pieces, is that uh, how can we train ourselves on common cultural experiences shared by the members of the groups that we're leading. Uh, so yeah, just a few thoughts on how we can prepare. I think overall we need to be trying to foster, I think, inside of ourselves as clinicians, that's ethical practice, like requires us to be open to differences, open to cultural nuances and various cultural experiences, various cultural values, lifestyles, beliefs, behaviors. So we need to be always growing in that area. Okay. Uh, so just a couple more thoughts on this before I wrap up the video is I think there's an opportunity for seeing how the core counseling skills can be used to address culture. I think sometimes we talk about addressing culture in counseling and in group counseling, but then it's not like what's the how though? How do you do that? Or it might be some vague skills, but it's just saying, hey, that would be important. And it's like, good luck. So I just a few thoughts on my end of from my counseling experience, working with groups as well as individuals, is a lot of times it's using the core counseling skills. So it's not necessarily like some uh, incredibly unique skills. Sometimes there can be like creative and really targeted cultural interventions used for a specific purpose, but a lot of times culture surfaces, regularly, but can't necessarily anticipate it. So, for example, I had a client talked about some really negative reactions towards white people in general. And I was the counselor, so I had to be ready for that conversation. And I used the core counseling skills of immediacy and feeling reflections to roll with that experience. The immediacy of addressing our present moment relationship. This also occurred in a group where I was the only person, or the only white person, and the rest were people of color, but they're having negative reactions towards uh, white people, particularly white men. So I had to be ready to kind of navigate that and not shy away from it. Also, not necessarily push it and force the conversation, but is just inviting into that space and being ready for it. So yeah, I just felt like feeling reflections of addressing the anger or the hurt or the sadness or the sense of rejection, the immediacy of addressing how is it for you that I'm white, and you're having these reactions. Uh, so those can be some important skills. Also just the skills of reflecting meaning and reflecting patterns of feelings can be really important. Maybe reflecting feelings of feeling less than in a cultural sense, by people in authority. Like that occurred in one of my counseling experience in the past, where I was working with a group where there were some really negative experiences towards some people in authority in the organization that I was at. And so some people of color had some really negative experiences there, and they needed to make sense of that as a group, and they kind of need to make sense of how to respond behaviorally. Uh, so yeah, like I guess that leads to the behavioral side of things. So a lot of times we need to be thoughtful of like, are the group members or the clients ready for just to behaviorally address those negative cultural experience and negative cultural judgments, and how can we kind of help them access systems and access advocacy measures to be able to do that. uh, so that goes into some of the referrals and some of the almost like we need to be aware of the resources around us so we can help clients take next steps. So just a few ideas there, not once again an exhaustive list, but a few ideas. The last thing that I wanted to address. So for the students taking the group counseling class, other people who might be watching this video, there's a video called "The Color of Fear." So students, you'll be watching that video this week, and it's a video of a group that's navigating strong cultural experiences, and there's a lot of big reactions and uh, a lot of language used around culture that can be pretty sensitive. So I'm not necessarily trying to like get you to be like cautious or anything about viewing it, but I think it's important to just recognize that the video just tries to lay it all out there. The participants just kind of bluntly talk about their experiences. Uh, this might bring up reactions inside you. There might be strong reactions inside you. I've had lots of students in the past also just have big, pretty big reactions and negative reactions towards the title of the documentary, but of The Color of Fear. But I think as you watch it, you'll understand a bit more about the video and about, I think, the potential power to it of understanding how to lean into reactions around culture rather than lean away from and avoid. So yeah, I'm happy to stay connected to help you make sense of those reactions, and students, you'll be addressing some of those in the discussion board. But yeah, I'm happy to either an office hour or just via email stay connected on those topics. So yeah, those are a few thoughts for now, and yeah, feel free to reach out.